I think this is something that is wildly underestimated as a potential resource in our world. That if you look around and you notice what people are doing much of the time in the world, they're trying to get somebody to hear them and see them, right? And get them. And we train people in critical thinking if you're in higher ed. We train people in speaking skills. We don't train almost anybody in being on the other end and actually hearing what the people are saying. And most people, like they'll say, you can't argue somebody out of a position, but you can listen them out of it. That most people can't take in new information, can't shift their position, can't really hear you until they've been heard first. Good listening is genuinely trying to get the other person's world. You may not agree with it. I don't. I teach difficult dialogues. I can promise you that people say a lot of things that, make my blood run cold. But I know enough to know that even if my agenda is to get them to change, right, which is not a good agenda often, but if that's my agenda, the first step is listen and then listen and then listen again and then maybe listen some more and maybe listen a little bit more after that. Because if they get listened to like that, where you're listening from a place of genuine curiosity, not an agenda, not a criticism, not running in your mind how you're going to respond, not thinking about, oh, that reminds me of my story, and then rushing off into your story, not interrupting them, not even necessarily asking them questions, except questions that will keep them going deeper into what they're trying to share so that you have a better shot at getting it. If you listen like that, A, they will love you. You will become their best friend. But lots of things start to happen, right? They will start to be able to reevaluate in their own mind what their thoughts are. They will sometimes start to grow emotionally. It allows them to process emotions, right? It allows people to really think some new thoughts that they've never thought before because nobody's ever been on the other end listening so that they can explore what do they actually think about this. People can start to heal from things that have happened to them. If you pay attention in the day, if you offer this kind of attention, even if it's for a few seconds to the checker at the grocery store, or it's to your child in the back seat of the car after they've coming home from school, or it's your partner at home or your roommate, they'll start telling you stuff that's gone wrong. They'll start telling you, oh, there was so much traffic when I drive, right? Oh, so-and-so hit me when I was at school. Or, wow, my day is so overwhelming, right? What we're trying to do is release this stuff, is metabolize it, is process and move on so we can stay in the present. But most people have this huge backlog, like years, decades, sometimes millennia. If there are whole groups of people we don't listen to in the world, some groups dominate the airspace, people who look like me, I happen to look pink, as I would say. Some genders tend to dominate the airspace, right, and so on. If we let people do it, it allows them to recover from stuff that happened to them in the past that nobody ever listened to, that they're still stewing on and reacting to, and it allows them to come into the present finally. Actually be dealing with the new moment in front of them rather than constantly in this backlog of injuries and slights and confusions and overwhelms that nobody ever heard. So attention, which we spend our whole day putting our attention on something, video games or work things or the driving or the child or whatever. But if we divert a bunch of that towards our fellow creatures, human creatures, two-leggeds, right? Who are seeking all day long someone to hear them, then everybody calms down is what happens. And this is, again, even to the point of war. If we actually could hear what has happened to the Israelis and the Palestinians, and I know people with these kinds of listening projects, where you give a day to these Israelis and they will tell you all the horrible things that they've endured at the hands of, the Palestinians. You give the next day to the Palestinians, they will do the same thing about what has happened to them at the hands of the Israelis, right? You go on like this for a couple of days, and at the end of that, they are beginning to be able to hear the other people because they've felt heard. This is true in a marriage. It's true pretty much any. So if we're trying to have a world that works, and boy, do we need to put our attention on trying to get there now. One of the most basic things is this capacity to train ourselves to be good listeners for the other populations. And one of the ways to do that is to be listened to. I have for 40-some years split time on a weekly or multi-times a week basis with other human beings where they call me up and we have a half an hour and I get 15 minutes and they get the other 15 minutes. Or I call somebody up and we have 12 minutes and I get 5 minutes of that and they get 5 minutes of that. And so for my whole life, that's what's made it possible for me to get out and do work on, say, the climate crisis. That's been the hardest work on my heart that I can imagine. Indigenous justice is not a party. It's hard work. If I didn't have people listening to me like that and processing my feelings about it, I couldn't keep going. So for your listeners who are the kind of people who are really devoting their lives to making the world a better place, both learning how to listen is critical, but being listened to is equally critical.